ISO FileMaker Magazine, the professional's resource for FileMaker know-how.
Well, hello there and welcome back to yet another FileMaker tutorial video. My name is Matt Petrowski. We are going to be learning about FileMaker and developing in FileMaker. I've been working with FileMaker pretty much on a daily basis for over 30 years. If you are interested in learning more about FileMaker in a faster fashion, then check out FileMakerMagazine.com. Now, what I'm going to be doing is going through every single possible step that I can explain as I develop a solution, and a solution that you will probably end up wanting to use. So let's not talk about the intro anymore. Let's head to my desktop and take a look at what we're going to be learning. All right, thanks for joining me here on my desktop. Now, the first thing I want to show you is how do I set up and develop in FileMaker. That's an important thing if you want to be a FileMaker developer. I use a tool called LaunchBar. There are others. I need to learn about the other tool that's popular, but you can see right here that I've got two different versions that are installed, and the one thing I want you to pay attention to is this little tilde right here. So there's multiple places that you can install, and I'm on a Macintosh, by the way, and you can probably do this on Windows as well. I'm not as familiar with the Windows environment. It's been a long time since I've developed there as a primary machine. But here you can see that I've got FileMaker 22.01 and 22.1. Now, the reason as a developer you're moving back and forth is many times you've got a server that will only go back 2 versions, or you've got a client that's using a specific version and you have to use that same version, not wanting to use functions from newer versions that are not in older versions. So the interesting thing here about the tilde, as I bring that up, and let me go ahead and do that, FileMaker, let's go with the 21. I'll hold down the command, that brings up a window which is off screen, which I'll bring on screen, and we will take a look. So when we look at the reverse of the hierarchy, I've got my hard drive, my users, my user folder, and then the applications folder. Now that is much different than this applications folder right here, just above my head. Let's move that. This is the general applications folder. Now that is where you can put a version of FileMaker, but if you're running multiple versions of FileMaker, if you give each of those versions their own application folder, what happens is FileMaker treats and uses a different cache for each of them. It doesn't share things across the multiple versions. Whereas if you have something like the preferences file, settings that you've set into one version, those are all shared by one preference file. As I zoom out here and then zoom back in, you can see over here on my sidebar, one of the folders that I have is a link to the preferences file. Now we'll come back to this application folder, but when we go into that preferences, what we're going to see when we look at it is pretty much all of the preferences that are happening on your machine as preferences are getting updated. You can see that shift that just happened right there with the Finder, and sorting by date modified allows you to know when things are modified. Now as we go down this, actually I'll open FileMaker right now. We'll open up FileMaker 21. And what we're going to see is with that opening, this is the first time what I've done is I've trashed my original preference. I will say that I will accept the terms of the software and say accept. And this is all for the sake of being able to know what the environment is and what's going on. Now we can see two different things that were updated. One of them was and it jumped right there again, there's the FileMaker Pro plist. This is the preferences file. We can see that it's 3 kilobytes. My personal is actually much larger because as you use FileMaker, it remembers dialog positions, it remembers open files, it remembers all kinds of different things. You can also see that there is a Monkey Bread plugin. Now, if you have not watched any of my previous videos, I do not develop in FileMaker without the Monkey Bread plugin, and there's a very good reason for that, is that it basically turns the FileMaker environment into something much easier for a developer to work within. If you don't, then FileMaker is still a little bit, it's just not, they have not really focused on FileMaker from the mindset of this is a developer tool for developers. It is always Claris, going back to when it was FileMaker Incorporated, and then FileMaker Claris even before FileMaker Inc., has always had this mentality that we are an easy to use, no or low code. They've switched between the two type of environment, and we really don't need to cater to the highest of the high developers. Although FileMaker does provide, you have access to every possible thing you could ever want as a developer. And if you watch my other videos, you know that regular expressions is a gripe that I have, etc. Now, what we're going to be doing in this series of videos, and there's going to be multiple of them, and if you would like to get involved with being able to interact with me one-on-one, I'm going to be having times when I go and create a Google Meet, and you are able to interact with me based on this content. What we are looking at right here, favorites, this is what we're going to be replicating. This is currently blank, but what I'm going to show you and walk you through is how you can create your own FileMaker launcher tool. Now, why would we do that in FileMaker? Because it's easier and it's better than what we have right here. And I'm going to explain every aspect of FileMaker that I know about. Now, currently, this is very blank. I don't have anything in this, but I am going to walk you through the process of what FileMaker provides in terms of its launcher and what we're going to do with our launcher. So first off, I need to get an instance of FileMaker server running, and we're also going to go back to that folder really briefly to take a look at what we have in there. Something that's interestingly curious is this right here. So we've already discussed that in the applications, you can see that I've got all of these different versions of FileMaker, and I intentionally put the version number with the build number. That's that last thing right there. You've got a major, a minor, a iteration, and then build, I believe, is what we're looking at there in terms of those. If I've got the words wrong, look them up. I'm wrong. No big deal. I have a few ETS because I have been involved with FileMaker for a long time with their external testing. So in that 21, let's go with that one, 21. So in each of these folders, you can see that I have this same file, this config JSON off. And if we go back to an earlier version, let's say 20, no, it also had JSON. In between, I'd say FileMaker 19 and FileMaker 21, this file was named something different. I forget exactly what it's called now. I have it in my original applications, but we really don't need to know that anymore. What we need to know is that this config JSON, as a FileMaker developer, allows you to turn features or behaviors of how FileMaker is going to operate on and off. So let's quickly take a look at that. Now, all I do is prior to launching the application, I'll go to my application switcher, and we can see that FileMaker is loaded right there. I'll quit that. I would need to intentionally take this off, the off. So as soon as I take that off, launching this copy of FileMaker will use what is in this config JSON file. So let's go ahead. I'm going to launch this with a tool that I use called JSON Editor. We can see that right there. And we can see some of the settings that are in this particular file. Now, as I stated, if you're working with an older version of FileMaker, then you know what the name of the file was. I will have put it below on the video here. It's not super big deal. But it was just named something else, and it was just a different format. It wasn't in JSON. Now, all of these items that we have here, now, if you're watching this video far in the future from when I recorded it, there may be more of these, and some of them may be renamed. You do need to read about these in terms of what they do. Soliant and Whimdecort has always been a really good resource for the investigation. They interact really heavily because they have a lot of high-profile clients that they work with that Claris is interested in retaining as clients or users of FileMaker. So knowing what these do and what you are testing for is the highest of high-end troubleshooting and debugging when it comes to FileMaker. If you are a beginner, if you're an intermediate, knowing about this is good, but you don't have to worry about it because working with it is not something that you're actually going to be doing on a regular basis. If you are going to be a FileMaker developer as part of your career, then this is just the system that I use. When I am not testing, I simply put a suffix of off. When I am testing and debugging something, I will take off on and restart the application. When you do, it will use all of those flags and settings in order to control how FileMaker behaves. For the most part, this is not something that you need to do on a regular basis. So I won't be covering or going into depth on this. Knowing that it's there is what I want you to know about. So moving on, as I close all of these, what we're going to talk about next is the one other file that FileMaker uses. Well, actually, it has a couple of other files. Let's go through the one file which controls your default fields. All right, so the other file that we are interested in, and there's other locations where there are files that are set that control things. These are secrets. I shouldn't call them secrets. These are very little known things about FileMaker when you just get started with FileMaker. And these are the things that you often ultimately want to know about and end up finding out about. So in this particular folder, and we'll scroll up here and I will show you. So on my main drive, within the shared folder, so you have your users folder where your user folder or your user account folder is going to be, but then you have this shared folder. Within that shared folder, we are going to find a folder for FileMaker. Now, there used to be that FileMaker stuck things in FileMaker Pro Advanced prior to FileMaker merging FileMaker Advanced and FileMaker and putting the functionality all into just standard FileMaker. Then that was put into FileMaker. Let's see what's in there. Okay, just a bunch of other stuff. Even when they went with Claris Pro is what they were doing back in, what was that, 22? But ultimately what we're looking at is in the shared folder, in the FileMaker folder, in a shared folder. So let's go ahead and look at that full path. So you can see right there, it is your hard drive, your users, shared, FileMaker shared. There is a file called FM default fields. Now you can see I've got a couple of different ones here. I would swap these in. It was formerly named, actually, it may not be using the default fields. It may be using, it's probably one of these here, because this one has a later date in this particular case. So if it's not that one, we can see really easily, we can make a change to this. Let me open this up actually in Vim. I will drag this to Vim. That's opening up off screen, which I will bring on screen really quickly here, just so we can take a peek at what it looks like. I've covered this in other videos. Again, it seems like it's super convoluted, but it's really not that big of a deal. We've got a definition of the fields. Now, again, this is saying a source of 1901. Let's open up the other default fields and see what that says as well. And that source says 1701. So I'm doing this ad hoc right here. One of these actually applies. And we can see what happens when we make a change to this file when we're in FileMaker and we actually create a new database. So let me open up FileMaker. Finally, we'll get into that. And I will head back and show you the I will show you the other location that applies to us with FileMaker. There's essentially three locations that we are interested in. One is relative to FileMaker, and that's where you've got that config JSON file, which controls flags on and off. Two is this default fields, which allows you to control what fields are used whenever a new table is created. And then three is a shared or common location for multiple versions of FileMaker with regards to plugins, themes, and other things specific to FileMaker. All of these things are things that you need to know about before you even get into FileMaker, because many times they become a little bit of a hassle that if you don't learn about them, then you're wondering, okay, how do I change these default fields that keep coming up? So if we create a new file, and we'll create a new blank one, and I'll just go ahead and throw that onto my desktop, and we'll call it testing right here, and we'll click save. Of course, I already have a testing 1, so we'll do testing 2. We'll create that file. So all of these fields right here, these are not the fields that FileMaker or that you are familiar with would have created. So if we cancel this really quickly and we get rid of that, and then we go in, I'm going to quit FileMaker now. which I just did with on the bar there with Command Q on the, it's really nice. You can cycle through applications here with your cursor, and whatever your cursor's over or whatever you tab to, if you hit Command Q at that time, like I just quit Notes. It's a nice little thing on the Mac if you don't already know that. So what we'll do is in this shared folder, I will put a prefix here, and I'll put a prefix here just because I'm guessing on which one is actually the default, but we will see what Claris uses, and it's using this from inside FileMaker is what it's going to be doing. So we'll open up FileMaker, we'll do 22 again, and we will open up our recent. So we'll go to our recents. Testing is going to be right there. Recents is something we're definitely going to want to pay attention to. Makes it really nice. Now in this one, I've got my original table where it was using my personal defaults, but we go over to tables and we create a new table. We'll just call this another, and we'll create that, and we go look at there we can see that when we look at this, these are the fields that FileMaker uses. Now, depending on your conventions, being, I want to use this for the primary key every time, all the time. Whether it is the word primary key or whether it is the word, which I prefer, ID, or what some developers prefer, because ID can be used in other languages, in particular OAuth, or in other technologies, I should say. Some developers will actually use an underscore on their word ID. Now, I tend to do what's called a separation of concerns, so I like to use ID without the underscore in my development, and then if I'm going to be doing something with outside technologies like not OAuth, OAuth was I don't know why I said OAuth, it's because of aging. Gosh, I forget what it is right now. It is the technology that FileMaker is now heading towards to use as the default inter-application communication, which I will get and probably put down there below. What is it? Let's go check this, Matt. I hate it when I forget something. We'll go into this and we will go to our manage. We'll go to our security. We will go to look at this. We will look at this, and we will scroll this down because it's right here. data. OAuth, OData, OPath, whatever. That's what I was wanting to do. OData is what Claris and FileMaker are heading towards, something you do want to learn. Heading back into the paths or the file and what they are, we'll go ahead and quit this, and we will make one of these active, and just to test and see if it's the FM default fields, we'll open FileMaker back up. Oh, did I not quit it? There we go. Now I quit it. FileMaker, we'll open that back up. That will open up. We will go open our recent. We'll open our testing 2. We'll go into the defined database, and we will create a new table. Table 3, create that, and there it is, right there. So, in fact, it is we'll discard that. It is not the default fields. That is the old one. The new one is this FM default fields. And as already mentioned, I already showed you where it is. Shared, FileMaker shared. All right, location number 3. Location number 3 is also something that I have here on my sidebar because I work with FileMaker so much. I believe extensions will get me to it. Is it that extensions? Is it that one? There we go. I believe it is that one. All right, so we'll hide FileMaker. This is another important place that you need to know about things, because what's going to happen is when you are in FileMaker, and let's go into FileMaker so that you know. So inside here in FileMaker, we bring up our settings, and sorry if I'm going a little fast with the command keys. If you're on Windows, you will find it at the bottom of the edit menu, I believe. On the Macintosh, it will be right here, your settings. It's always command comma. I'm just so used to using that, bringing up my settings. So when we go to one area in particular, plugins, when we have plugins installed in FileMaker, and as I mentioned, one of the most critical plugins that I will not develop in FileMaker without having this plugin is the MBS plugin because of features that it adds. We have a reveal plugin folder. This was added, I forget at what point in time, but you can see that when I click that, that is a very confusing thing right there. If I switch back to FileMaker, I am clearly listing that I have 4 plugins installed. Scriptmaster, which I don't use as much, unfortunately, now. Base Elements, which I use for some. Bbox, I used primarily for Python. And then MBS, I use all the time for all kinds of different things. When I click the Reveal Plugin folder, we can see that what FileMaker brings up, and we'll zoom in here, is it brings up the path of my users, mat, library, application support. That's going to be the same down into FileMaker. So going up the path into this FileMaker folder is the key that we want to know as a FileMaker developer, because FileMaker then started adding a subfolder for specific versions. But prior to doing that, FileMaker would store most things within this general FileMaker folder. So heading back into this, we can see a couple of really interesting things. One of them is that extensions folder. So when we look at the path, we are interested in this general FileMaker, not the one that takes us down into one of these specific versions, and that's really old right there. This probably won't exist for you. I just keep carrying it forward because I do have FileMaker 18 and 19 installed, and those were called FileMaker Advanced. And we're not really interested in putting things in specific versions where we can see the extensions. We're interested in putting them into this folder because it becomes common to all the versions that we have installed. So in mine, what you can see is that's where we have a couple of different folders. And again, like with the Claris, with the JSON file for the config controlling flags of how we determine how FileMaker works, I am using, if FileMaker creates a folder, which add-ons is one of them, dictionaries, dynamic templates, themes, which is actually a hidden feature, they were going to make it so that users could provide their own themes at some point in time, but it was very brief, where outside parties could create themes for FileMaker. There was a themes folder, but this actually isn't created by default, I don't believe anymore. But if we have the, in this extensions, originally this extensions is for the FileMaker plugins, extending FileMaker's capability, and that's where you can see those are the 4 plugins that I have installed. Well, I can use this themes folder where I can put in my own themes, some of which you can see from when I was working on Apex Blue, which is the default theme of FileMaker. I was trying to make that multiple colors or multiple different variations. I had an Apex and was doing Apex Purple, Green, Orange, just different colors for the same thing. But the whole Apex plus templates thing didn't actually take off. Claris didn't end up using them. But this is where I will create off versions. So when I'm testing, because this folder is used for all versions of FileMaker, in order for me to test different variations of add-ons, if I'm working with them, all I have to do is simply turn off FileMaker or shut it down, and then come in here and rename. So I can name this one off 2 while I switch this one to then add in modules, and now FileMaker is going to use whatever is within this particular folder. It's a very easy way to do your own testing and working with things from the standpoint of just simply renaming. So all I have to do is call this one off. It will not be used. And again, presuming that I restart FileMaker, and then there we go. Same with plugins. If you are using multiple plugins, you can see that I have a folder called turned off. So all I have to do really here, and you can see I've got multiple versions of base elements. Let's actually collapse all of those. So what I will do is I will simply just, if I want to test a new version of a plugin, I will simply just throw that plugin into the turned off, and it will ask me here if I want to replace or not because I already have one, but I won't do that. That is how I can manage different plugins and working with them across multiple versions. And of course, if you are testing a plugin and do not want that to be shared across all of your versions of FileMaker when installed, we're not going to use the general FileMaker folder extensions. We're going to go into the FileMaker folder, and we're going to put that extension into the specific release. So in this case, it would be FileMaker 22 down into the extensions, and it would look like that. So we've got application support, FileMaker Pro, the version number, then extensions, put the plugin there, and that will be specific just to that version of FileMaker. All right, and so for a video wrap-up of this first of this series of videos where I'm going to cover everything I can think of about developing or being a developer in FileMaker, we have just understood and established that there's 3 critical areas outside of FileMaker that we want to know about where we can control those things. Now, as a developer, what we're going to do is we are going to make things easier on ourselves. So I am going to bring those up. Let me bring up my launch bar. And we'll bring up FileMaker Pro. So that was our first one, was using the specific folder. And did that open up? FileMaker, I want to use the command in order to open that. I don't know where the folder went to open that, but I'm going to open this off screen and go to my applications, and we're going to go to this specific folder. Now, the one thing that we can do in FileMaker when we were developing in this is we get this path right here. So to know whether or not this file actually exists, we're going to set up something for that. So heading back to FileMaker, we're going to show the data viewer. Ooh, and all of my shortcuts are turned off because I deleted the preferences. That's one thing I do, is I turn on preferences for specific things. Ooh, also what we have right here is in our FileMaker settings, because I had deleted my settings, I don't even have advanced tools. So if you are there with FileMaker and you have not even turned this on, then that's the first thing you have to do as a developer. So we're going to be going through the settings in another video of all the settings that I set in order to set up my default FileMaker. But for right now, we'll go ahead and quit FileMaker right now. We'll open it back up, FileMaker 22, and my tools will be turned on. I will then be able to use the debugger and the data viewer. So we can see right here, we now have my tools window. My tools gives me access to the script debugger and, most importantly, the data viewer, which as you go through this series, you're going to find out that this is where we develop a lot of things, is creating and using watch variables in order to compose our functions. Now, what we were looking at when we switched to the Finder is FileMaker gives us a function that we can know where FileMaker Pro is, and we can actually detect whether this file exists. So what I'm going to do is highlight this, copy it, go back over to FileMaker, create a new watch variable, and in here, I'm going to type get application, is that what it is? FileMaker path. There it is right there. So we can see, because automatically evaluate is turned on, we get all of the location of where this is. And if I wanted to add that, all I would have to do right there. Now with that path, I am able to test whether or not that file exists. Now, of course, because of the off, I might want to do that right there. And that's one of the many things that we are going to look at with regards to the location of paths. The other paths, we're also going to look for those as well. All right, so for the other paths, what we're going to do is going to do a little bit of a trick, is we are going to borrow those from the terminal. So over here in the terminal, I'm using iTerm. You can see that right there. I love iTerm over the built-in terminal, but whether you're using the built-in terminal on the Mac or I don't know if the PowerShell does this in Windows or what. Again, I don't work in Windows a whole lot. But pretty much any file that we are looking at, we can drag into this terminal and it will give us the path. So if I go to the shared folder and go to FileMaker and go to shared, and then I have this right here. If I want this path, which is the file that I want to have, I can drag it, and you can see right there that it gives me that path. All I have to do now is copy that, and I'm going to go back into FileMaker, show my data viewer again, and create a new watch variable, and I will just put that there. This is a great place for you to collect a lot of things in here. So that's the second of the 3 places that I want to have and track we're going to put a nice feature here in FileMaker that you click one button and it will open all of them for us in one fell swoop. This is what we do as developers. We develop tools for ourselves to make our jobs easier along with developing our solution so that next time, the next thing we do, it's much faster. So the third location that we are looking at is that extensions location where we are looking at this right here, the general FileMaker extensions. And I am going to drag that. I'll actually get rid of this. And there's also extensions that you can use where I've used them in the past. I forget what they are, where you can right-click and then you can have an option where it will actually copy the path of that folder to your clipboard. But in this particular case, I have not done that. But we will take this over to FileMaker as well. Show our data viewer again. And we will create a new variable right here and put that in and paste that. Now, if we do have things in quotes in the command line, we don't need that escape right there. In the shell, spaces are your dividers between arguments. And so we need to know that as a developer. In this particular case, if something is within quotes or we're going to hand it into somewhere else with quotes, then we don't need that backslash to escape the space. In this particular case, we are interested in recognizing a difference between what FileMaker gives us back and how FileMaker uses paths internally versus the operating system. The operating system starts at \users, whereas if we go look at the first one of what this function getFileMakerPath is returning, we can see that we get the volume in front of it. Now, we are interested in that for the fact that FileMaker uses paths internally in a different way than the operating system does. So whenever we're going out to communicate with the operating system, we need to convert those paths. Fortunately for us, FileMaker does have a function in newer versions, and it is, if we start to type in path, we can see that we get some of the functions from plugins, but we also get convert from and convert to FileMaker path. So these two functions become really critical when we are going to do things outside in the operating system with FileMaker, and we will end up doing that. So if we select convert from FileMaker path, and I paste in here, and I believe, if I get the word correct, I don't know that I will. POSIX? Nope. Is it Unix? I will need to look up the documentation, which brings us to a good point. What do I use for documentation? I use an app called Dash. Now, you can, in FileMaker, I can monitor this, and in FileMaker, we can always go up to our help and go to our option of our FileMaker Pro help. It used to be that FileMaker had this local, and it would be extremely nice if they would bring this back, but they have stopped doing that. You can no longer download the help. They make you go out onto the web. It's one of the things that I'm not very fond of. If we switch over to this application, Dash, right here, which I will bring on screen, I don't have the latest version of FileMaker, but you can see that this application, and there is an equivalent one for Windows, is a great way to access all of your FileMaker documentation. So right here, I can actually say path as well, and I can see right here I've got convert to and convert from, and we can take a look at this, and we can scroll down and look at the different options that it takes. It's POSIX, but it is POSIX path, so I was just missing part of that. So if we go over to that function, and I pass in the right value. Why is it not? It isn't known as a constant. All right, here's another thing that's very curious and interesting to know. Some FileMaker functions want what is known as a constant. In FileMaker, there's a small collection of constants, and oftentimes they end up converting into a number. So if I take my quotes off of this, I'm going to get the result of what I want. You can see right there, it's giving me now the OS version of the path by taking off the volume. What I mean by this in terms of constants giving you numbers, you'll notice when you have things like FileMaker has a text for style. So text style add, and here is some text. Well, in this styles, some FileMaker functions will take something like this, bold, right here. You can see that here in this result, you won't see the style actually applied, whether it is or not. But watch what happens when I take this off as well. You're getting the exact same result, but what's being returned is actually quite different. FileMaker is not recognizing this word bold when it's in quotes, because what FileMaker is expecting is this constant. So bold is a constant within FileMaker, and we can see it because if we do this, bold. And you can see that the word bold without quotes is returning the number 256, whereas bold with quotes, FileMaker is going to return bold. So if I put in what I had before, this POSIX path, if I copy this and paste this and then comment that out, you can see that POSIX path is a constant and is returning the value of 1. If we head back over to my documentation, go over to dash, and we see that WinPath is also a constant, we can go back over to FileMaker and we can put that in, and we can see that it is returning a constant of, or it is a constant of 2. Switch back over, URL path was number 3, and you can see that lo and behold, FileMaker is actually showing you what the numbers are that are going to be returned for that particular function. So all of this being said, the reason that we needed to convert this to a FileMaker path is if we are going to hand this to something else outside in the operating system, whether it's a technology or a plugin talking on behalf of FileMaker to the operating system, it needs to be in a format that FileMaker actually likes. Now, in FileMaker, what can we do? If we did not convert this, if we actually had this be the FileMaker path and the file that we were looking at, FileMaker does have a way to test for a particular file. We're going to go ahead and monitor this, and we're going to head into the scripts. I'm going to use the Command-Shift-S in order to bring that up. And this is just to show you, because I'm not going to walk down this path to show you how it actually is. But FileMaker has, if I type in exists, FileMaker has this function right here, get file exists. So I would have been able to, say, for example, create a variable, and I would be able to type path. I would be able to click specify. I would be able to say get FileMaker path right there, and config whatever it is, .json, I forget what the name is, but ultimately we would be able to use FileMaker's internal path, and we would be able to pass that to this particular script step, and it would tell us whether or not the file is there. In this particular case, I'm not interested in that because I am going to be using a plugin to call a system function that will open a folder for me. So we'll close the scripting workspace. Go ahead and close that, revert all. I don't need that. In my data viewer, I have all of the paths that I need. So we'll go to my data viewer. They are all right there. I can see each one. Now what I want to do is I may want to test for the file, in this particular case, these two, but I may want to actually open the folder. So what I'm probably going to do is take this off and take the name of this off as well, and just open the folder so that I can check for those files. Now there is a function, we'll leave the data viewer open here, on the Macintosh, and I'm sorry I don't know what it is on Windows, that will open a particular folder. So if I type the word open right there, this is a system command. And Todd Guy said it really well at one point in time. He said, you know, working with the terminal is nothing more than like a chat window where you're chatting back and forth with the operating system. So in the operating system, it happens to be that there's tons of commands and tools and things that you can use. You just have to know, what operating system is being used. On the Macintosh, we've got them here. We've got them on Linux when FileMaker Server is installed on Linux. On Windows, we've got binary tools as well. So if we take, say, for example, this extensions folder, and I throw this in here, and I close this window, when I run this command, what it's going to do is it's going to open that folder for me. So our goal here as developers was we want to, when we're in FileMaker, to simply be able to open all three of these folders. So what we're going to do is we're now going to consolidate these. We are going to get this one, and I'm going to create a new variable, and I'm going to paste that in. That's fine. I could have duplicated that as well. I've got this string right here, which will come over. We'll go to my third one. I will put that in. I will paste it. You can see that what I'm doing is I'm copying from one variable, and when I go into the other, I am using the escape character. So this is an inline or a comment character. This is an inline comment, which means FileMaker will not evaluate this. And what we're interested in is setting up all of these with simple open instructions. So what we're going to do is we are going to create a multiple command, something that in Linux or in the operating system would actually do multiple things. So if I type open, and the tilde stands for my home directory, but then I use a semicolon, and then I type open with a semicolon and let's say downloads right there, those both should open. And they, in fact, did for me. I got a window off screen, and I got a window that came on screen right there. So it is the semicolon right there that actually means you're going to execute multiple commands. So all I have to do over in FileMaker is have each of those be separated. Now, I want to keep things clean. And if you've not worked with FileMaker, my apologies, but I am going to use a shortcut. And one of the most critical, most important functions we could ever learn in FileMaker is the let function. This one function is probably used more often than any other function I can think of. It is the one way that you can create clean code and organize things very easily. I have an expansion where I can type in fmlet and it expands out into the expanded form of the let function. This allows me to put each one of these on a line. Now, as I mentioned, I am not going to put the name of the file. For this one, I am going to say that this one is going to be, and we can call these whatever we want. I'm just going to call them 1, 2, and 3 for right now. We're going to put that one first. Then I'm going to get this one right here up to that point. And I'm going to hit a return. I'm right here, if you don't know, in the code editor in FileMaker, you cannot hit the tab itself. If you do, it moves you to another area in this dialog. If you use the Option key and you tab, it will actually indent. So I use tilde 2, and I will paste that in right there. Semicolon will be required, and I'll put 3 and equals, and then I will put in this last one right here, this extensions. Now, one of the things you need to note is the trailing slash right there allows us to identify that this is, in fact, a folder. So with each of the 3 critical locations, all I have to do, and I could prepend them now if I wanted to, but I'm going to show you a little bit of an easier way. This is a coder way of doing things in a smarter fashion than some other way. In other words, this open and putting this open with a space, open with a space is completely possible to do. But the coder way says, I've just duplicated this 3 times. I really would prefer to only have this be in my code 1 time. And that's what we're always looking for when we're developing in FileMaker or any other language. We are looking for the very instant that we have duplicated a word, a variable, a line of code, a script step, whatever it is. So in here, what we're able to do is we are going to use the list function, and I'm going to put a return here, tab that out, and tab right here, and put 1, colon, and then 2. And by the way, what's filling these variables in is not FileMaker, it is the Monkey Bread plugin. What we are seeing right here is because of the Monkey Bread plugin. What makes it, number 1, prevents us from accidentally mistyping things, but 2, making it really convenient to expand this code. So now that I have these here in this place, I can get rid of this and I can see that I'm getting my result right there. Now, if I want to put open in front of those, and if I wanted this to be formatted such that it will work the way that I expect, there's so many different functions that I could use in order to get this in. The one that I tend to go to by far is the substitute function. But first, what I'm going to do up here is I'm going to put a 0 and then put that single piece of code, open, right there, knowing that open was what I want in front. And in this particular case, sometimes dealing with spaces is a little bit of an interesting situation, but I'm going to put the space right there, which, as I stated in the operating system, spaces delimit all of your different arguments for commands. So here I'm interested in getting that open in front of this line, and this line. Now for me, the substitute is the easiest way to do that. Many times what you have to do is you would have to put a, let's go ahead and do it. We will type in fm sub, another expansion that I have. The Monkey Bread plugin, by the way, will allow you to indent and outdent things if they are not spaces. If it's hard tabs, notice that I can outdent and indent this multiple times. I'm doing that on the Mac here with the command bracket and close bracket, the open bracket and square brackets, as a matter of fact. So what are we going to be substituting? We're going to be substituting my list right there. Let's make this a little bit larger so that we can see what's going on. I will come back and I will indent these as I would prefer them to be. I believe there is a space right there. So what we're indenting for our search string, we are going to be looking for the return, and we are going to replace that with the 0. And what we can see is we're getting the start of what we want right there. Now I can do some other things right here where I can append some other items, and that's actually what I need to do. I need to, let's put in my semicolon. And we can see right there, we're getting my semicolon, which ends one command. You notice that I don't have the open on this one. That's going to require us to put the 0 in front right there. So now we have the beginnings of what we want. We have open, space, then a path, then we've got our semicolon, then we've got open, then a space, then our path, and if I can see this, and there it is right there, and then our open. What we have right now is a command that we can take over into the terminal and test whether it works. If it does, then what we have here, if we pass it to a command from a plugin, or if we used AppleScript because we're on a Macintosh, we would be able to open these folders. Let's go test it. So we go over to our terminal right here, and let's close all of our folders so I don't have anything on screen. We will paste the command right there, and we will just hit run. We got it one on screen, and did we get the others on screen? Those are saying right there, we've got our errors where it says the files usermat applications and usermat does not exist. So what happened is when I pasted this command, this is what's critical to understand, is remember what I mentioned is this right here, application support, including this space, that sees that as another argument. So we need to know how we address that in that particular area, and that is where we can put these commands within quotes, either single or double. In this particular case, single actually works best. So what we're going to do is we're going to replace this with a single quote with the open. So let's put a single quote there, and then let's put a single quote after and see what we get. So we've got open. In this particular case, there is a space right there, so that also needs to be escaped. So what we want to do is, we are not getting what we want right there because we're getting open, etc. We want this to actually be open and then just the path be in quotes. So let's take this off. And this is the problem with doing live development. Let me just switch to that and we'll take a look at the code. All right, so what I did is I modified the code, and here's what's interesting is whenever you're thinking about coding, we want to think about what's affected. In this particular case, I was attempting to actually quote the paths themselves down here as part of my substitute, when in fact, the substitute is actually putting in place that single open that I have right there with the space. So ultimately, what I wanted to quote were the paths. So there's two ways that we could do this, and I did both of them. The operating system understands both single quotes and double quotes. And if you don't know this, as a programmer, there is a difference in many different languages between single quotes and double quotes. Single quotes means that and it depends on the language, that what is in the single quotes is going to be, it is what it is. In other words, it's not interpreted. There's nothing in between those quotes that it's going to see something and then say, oh, I see what you have there, and you want me to swap something else, meaning it's interpreted. Whereas with some languages, when it sees double quotes, if there is something within there, many times it's the $ for a variable in JavaScript, or curly braces within the shell where you might have a subshell. Things are swapped out. So there is a difference between single quotes and double quotes in a lot of languages, and that's important to know. Now, FileMaker has this function called quote, which it will escape anything that is specific to FileMaker's own language. So we want to be careful with the quote, where many times when we explicitly want something, it's oftentimes better to do this, to say, I explicitly want a single quote, which has to be within quotes, concatenated to my path 1. And concatenated to that, I have another trailing single quote. The easy or the cheater way is to use the quote function and just say, I'll just throw quote on here. And what it will do is it will wrap everything that you have there. I believe I'm out of the way there. Everything is in quotes, in this case double quotes, which will escape or protect the space, but sometimes some characters get converted. So my suggestion in this situation is to do this. Just take the time, do the code that you know will not fail. Right there. So what we have now is we now have the command we want. We go over here, we paste it, and it opens all of my folders. There's folder 1, there's folder 2, and there's folder 3. And it's opening all of our magical folders that allow us to control the files that we want to do. The only thing we would need to do now is create a button in our solution, in our interface, with all of that code. So having composed that code in the data viewer, it's safe to close that out, leave it there, now go work on my user interface. So we go to the user interface, and we simply just select the button tool, and we type in something like open key 3. At this point, what we decide as a developer is if we are doing something for ourselves that we are going to take to other files, we want it to be agnostic of this specific file. Now, if I was to go into the scripting workspace and create a new script and put the command in here that is not agnostic to this file, it is specific to this file. And that's not something that I want to do. So many times what we do in FileMaker is if we're doing it for ourselves as a developer, we take our code and then we are going to use it within, in most cases, with a button within a single step. That single step means that I'm able to copy this button, go into another database, paste it, and it will still work. In this particular case, of everything that I have access to, I can use an MBS plugin that will call a system command. I could also use the bbox plugin, which can do that. The 360 works, and I see that the one plugin that's not here is the plugin that I would expect to be here. That one is the easiest of the opening commands. The base elements. For calling into the system, that is one of the easiest. And it's probably just base elements is not currently working with FileMaker 22. But because I'm on a Macintosh, to be honest, of all of the ways, the easiest way is AppleScript. So here I can just type in perform AppleScript. So with AppleScript, I actually have the ability to run a calculated AppleScript. There's my calculation engine, or a native AppleScript. And doing this, I can say, I believe it is do shell script right there. So that, combined with my code, is what will allow me to have a single button, not tied to a script, and something that I can copy into any other solution, something that you can copy into any other solution as well. I just need to go get my other code, which I'm going to do right now. Show my data viewer. Go get my code. And again, this is why the let function is so immensely valuable. Perform script, do shell script. We open this up, open my specify, put the code in here, and then we will compose this. We'll put this right here, and I'll call this Apple script command. Be as explicit as you can when you're going to do your coding, and that's what's going to make sense later on. I do need to clear up the 0, 1, 2, 3 as it doesn't make sense. That's what I'm going to come back to, and we will see that it works, and we will have had our first lesson, which I wanted to be shorter, but is ultimately longer, and hopefully you have learned a lot, and then the next video we'll head into settings. All right, we're about done. We have got everything working here. There's just a few more things that you need to understand about working with the operating system, the shell in this particular case, and the AppleScript. So on our button here, we used a single step. We've got the perform script. We've got the calculated script, which is all of our code. We've got our open command. We've got our do shell script. Now, in AppleScript, like in FileMaker, things have to be quoted. And it's a very good thing that we chose to use the single quotes for within the shell, because in AppleScript, we would have to escape or quote that for AppleScript to interpret itself. Heading over to this AppleScript window, we can see that when we paste the code in, there's this little hammer icon, which basically means check syntax. And it actually does work, because we get this bolded AppleScript instruction with a string right here. So it does see this. So we can see that the string itself wants its own set of quotes. And because we use the single quotes, those are within the double quotes, which allows the actual function to work. Now there's one other thing that's critical that we need to know about, and that is this right here. On your computer, you do not have a username named Matt unless you are also named Matt and you have that user. So this path won't work for you. The user's path of your specific folder on the Macintosh, in this particular case, as I hide AppleScript, is controlled by one particular function called the tilde. So what I want to do is I want to replace this right here with the tilde. What that's saying is that's saying my home folder in the library of my home folder, in the application support of my libraries folder, that is what I want to do. So that one little change right there means that this will now work on any other Macintosh computer for the logged in user's account. And this is actually valid because most every users folder has shared, unless it hasn't been created. So what we have now is something that should actually work. When we go into browse mode, and we'll get into the preferences right there, and we open our key folders, we've got right here, does not exist. The file, users, application support, 360 work, plugins, PID. Interesting. Don't know where that's coming from, but we can see whether or not all those folders were opened. We do only have 2 of them, so we would have to troubleshoot this a little bit. But we did get our folders to open. We would be able to work with our files now. Everything that we learned in this video What a massive video for a starting video if you made it all the way through the end. If you like learning FileMaker, I have a lot of content over at FileMakerMagazine.com. There is an endless number of things that you can learn in FileMaker. Head over to the website, check it out. It's the subscription on an annual basis is well worth it with regards to being less than an hourly wage for a not even a senior level developer. A senior level would probably be up at $200 an hour or plus. If you like this content, head over there. Otherwise, much luck, and until next time, happy FileMaking.
We hope you've enjoyed this video tutorial, and we'd like to say thank you for your subscription and your support. If you're not already a subscriber, head on over to www.filemakermagazine.com/subscribe for more information about the benefits of joining.